Your Excellency, Ms. Miriam Spiteri de Bono, President of Malta, distinguished guests, on behalf of the Acting President and Committee of the Malta Society of Arts, I warmly welcome you to the special ceremony marking the presentation of the Gold Medal of the Malta Society of Arts for 2025, awarded to Darrin Zammit Lupi. Let's give a round of applause to mark the start of the celebration. From documents preserved in the archives of the Malta Society of Arts, we know that the first gold medal was awarded in 1896. Since then, this award has continued to honor individuals who have made an outstanding contribution to the cultural and artistic life of our country. This evening, the Malta Society of Arts is proud to confer the gold medal for 2025 to Darrin Zammit Lupi, in recognition of his exceptional achievements in the field of professional photography and his lasting contribution to Malta's visual and cultural heritage. But before we dig deeper, let's enjoy our first musical interlude. Maria Elena Farrugia, who is on the piano, and Fiorella Camilleri on the flute, will perform Cenerentola, variations on a theme by Rossini, by Frédéric Chopin. Thank you, Maria Elena and Fiorella. That was Cenerentola, Variations on a Theme by Rossini by Frédéric Chopin. Now, while we arrange the chairs we have a short interview with Darrin by Ariadne Massa. I'd like to invite Ariadne and Darrin to join me here on stage for a short interview about Darrin, his life, his career, and his adventures.
Good evening, Your Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I think it's like the good old days being in the newsroom, Darrin. Yes, I've known Darrin Zammit Lupi for many years as his colleague and long-standing friend. I won't go into listing his achievements tonight. It's too long a list, and we only have a few minutes to uncover the person behind the images, what draws him to certain stories, and what keeps him doing the work he does for more than 3 decades. Darrin, as a photojournalist, you've watched history unfold and documented many major events. But one subject has come to define your career, and that's been the plight of irregular migrants in the Mediterranean. The moments you captured are imprinted in our minds like photographic negatives. What drew you so strongly to the story?
I did not choose the story. It was a case of the story choosing me. As a young photojournalist, I remember when I started off in this line of work, I used to sort of dream and fantasize about traveling around the globe to where the big stories were, wherever they may be. And then I joined Times of Malta, and I remember there was one sort of particular cold December morning, and in 1998, and this group of migrants were rescued by a Russian ship and brought to Malta, and I was down there photographing them being disembarked from the ship by the AFM. They were in a really, really bad way, I remember. And as I was making these photos, I knew they were pretty powerful, but I didn't understand just how sort of big a thing this was. But apart from obviously giving the photos to the Times of Malta, I also sent quite a few to Reuters, who I had started stringing for by then, and thought nothing more about it. Next morning, I switched on the TV, and there was the press review on Rai, and all the Italian newspapers, and all the front pages were mine. And I realized, wow, this is something really, really big. There's a lot of international interest in this story. And it kind of started off from there. Then it's in time I got more interested in the story. Migrant arrivals were a very regular thing back then. And I knew I didn't have to travel to far-flung places to find the big story. It had landed on our own doorstep. Accident of geography.
In fact, right behind us, there's a selection of your photos being projected. And I've always been fascinated by the play of light and darkness in your work. Is that something you consciously sought, or is it simply how you see the world?
It's something which developed with time. This thing of playing with high contrast, deep shadows, and so on. It's a style which I sort of grew into when I was working in Africa, in Uganda, in 2009, simply because of the amazing quality of light and the colors they have in Africa. In time I started to look for those moments. And I've actually found myself sometimes rather than the subject of the photograph, the quality of the light, the aesthetic value of the pictures felt more important to me. And that's not always a good thing for a newspaper photographer. Also because with the quality of newsprint, these kind of photos do not reproduce very well. And I remember having lots of discussions, with my editors back then. Some of them are here with us tonight, about why we can't use a certain picture. And it took me a long time to understand why this style of photography wasn't perhaps ideally suited to the newspaper. But in time, as quality got better and things went online and so on, that gave me more more opportunities to play with that kind of thing. And I still do to this day, yeah.
Remaining on the subject of migration, is there a particular encounter that changed the way you personally view the story?
I don't think there was a specific encounter. I think it was an accumulation of things, of looking into people's eyes, the way that they look when they know they have survived this terrible and very dangerous journey. The look of relief that they have survived it, but also knowing how much they have lost in order to carry out that journey. And what I started doing in time is, as I grew more proficient and the story grew bigger and bigger, even internationally, is I started going a lot deeper into the story. So what I would do is, if I photographed an arrival, for example, down at the AFM base or whatever, and there was a particularly striking photograph which really made the rounds both in Malta and overseas, I would then try to go to the camps to trace this individual in the photograph to tell their story. And we got some incredible stories out of that, very human stories.
If you were allowed in.
If we were allowed in. But back then, so, you made the request and you were allowed in. It was, they were better times in a sense. But then there was one encounter which was not with a migrant, it was with a human rights lawyer. I was in Australia, I had my exhibition showing over there. And the keynote speaker, the opening, was a very prominent human rights lawyer, David Mann. And one thing that he said in his speech was, Darrin is not only a great photographer, thank you, he is also a great humanitarian. And I had never thought of myself in those terms before, with that sort of label. And I really took it to heart. I said, this is what I need to be. This is what my photos need to be. It's more important to be a humanitarian, that my photos are fulfilling a humanitarian need, rather than just being a photographer who's after the visual impact. And I've tried to live up to that. And that comes with responsibilities as well, of course, which every time I'm out on these kind of assignments, they're very much at the foremost of my mind.
In fact, after everything you've seen, wars, disasters, beautiful moments, injustices, what still makes you pick up the camera? What keeps that spark alive?
It's very simple. We still have wars, we still have injustice, we still have disasters, but we still have beauty. So, it's important to continue to tell those stories. When it comes to injustices, for example, I find that the best way I can fight back, I can play my part, is through my photographs. That's why something like the Daphne project, for example, that's why it was so important to me, because it was the only way I knew how to, fight back against the system and so on. And it's the same with migration, I suppose, and so on. I mean, we all know it's a very controversial subject. It's many people don't want to talk about it. It's very divisive, and that is what I'm trying to do with my photos. I'm really trying very hard to sort of to make that point, to get my point of view across, and to make people think a bit more.
How do you manage to decompress? After a long assignment, I know you go for weeks sometimes at sea, then you come back. How do you manage to decompress?
With enormous difficulty. It's really hard to kind of get back to the ordinary, if you like, after living in these kind of high stress situations. I remember back in the days when I was at Times of Malta, I would do some of these missions and so on. I did other stuff, natural disasters, the tsunami in 2004. And you go out and you do those things, you see terrible things, and then you come back to Malta, and the next day you're back on the street doing the everyday kind of coverages, press conferences, pretty mundane in comparison to the stuff that he had been going through. And it used to really blow my mind. It used to, it used to mess me up because it felt like sometimes a bit too much to handle. I remember there was one time, Easter weekend of 2017, we were out at sea off the coast of Libya. We had a mass casualty event and lots of fatalities, including children. And I found myself in the rescue rib, the dinghy, surrounded by these corpses. And the camera gives you an element of protection. You are looking at things through the viewfinder, so that sort of protects you a bit. But then at one point, one of the crew members threw this shirt to me, this torn shirt, and said, "Here, cover the face of that person." And so I had to put down the camera to cover the face of this pregnant, dead woman and kind of look into her eyes as I did that. And that is something which stayed with me for a very, very long time, for years. And it's still, I still get flashbacks of it, almost 9 years later. So you never really fully decompress, but I do things like listen to music, watch movies, walk my dog, and sometimes even photography itself. Photography can be the wound, but it can also be the cure.
In fact,
and that's how I sort of try to handle it. Meeting with friends, talking with people who have been through similar experiences, and so who can understand where I'm coming from. Those kind of things all help enormously.
talking about healing, if you'll allow me, I'm going to touch on something a bit more personal. How has documenting life through a lens helped you process some of the most heartbreaking moments of your own life, including the illness and loss of your daughter Bex, and more recently your dog Cookie, who you used to go on long walks with?
I said earlier that the camera provides a sort of protective barrier. I mean, in this case, it didn't really. Just a wee bit. In Beck's case, it's 5 years since she passed away. In Beck's case, I think it was a question of. It's hard to put into words. It was kind of my way of dealing with it, but it was obviously with her full cooperation, and it was a project which we started together, which she believed in very, very strongly as well. And when the first part of her story was published, when she was still alive and we thought in possible recovery, the response to that story globally was overwhelming, and she felt it as well, and she felt greatly empowered. So when she had a relapse and she went back into hospital, she really wanted me to continue taking these photos and telling her story. Obviously, at that point, we had no idea that the story was going to end so tragically. But, heck, it did. But, having that camera there, I think, was one of the things which kept me going. It gave me something to focus on, honestly, I really can't find the words to describe how it felt. But there's no doubt that it helped me sort of cope with a traumatic event. There's nothing more traumatic in anyone's life than something like that, of course. With my dog Cookie, I sort of took a different approach. He passed away suddenly, so a few months ago, and I decided to photograph that because I took his loss very, very badly. Because I was very close to this dog. I started to photograph sort of the empty spaces, the absence, the traces he had left behind, and again that helped me sort of process the grief, if you like. The grief found this kind of home, within my photography, and that's how I deal with these things. We all talk about mental health and so on, and this is one of my sort of prime ways of dealing with these situations.
Tonight, the spotlight's on you. As Antonella was telling us earlier, it's an award that has been handed down to people who have made a difference for more than 100 years. If your work could leave behind just one message, what do you want? What would you like that message to be?
If we are talking about my migration work specifically, which is kind of the main body of my life's work so far, you don't know what's going to happen in the future, I'm still shooting. But the message would be this. I'd like to remind people that these people I photograph, I document, they are not statistics, they are human beings, they are people, they are us. The only reason it is them and not us is an accident of geography and an accident of the place of birth. That's it. Otherwise, it could very well be us. And what I want my photos to do is just make people pause and think, just that little bit longer about what they're seeing. And if they do that, then I've done my job.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Darrin, and congratulations on behalf of everyone here for this well-deserved.
Thank you, Ariadne Massa, thank you, and thank you, Darrin, for that very honest. Thank you for those stories and for sharing your emotions very authentically, very honestly. That did make me emotional, so thank you for that. I think everybody else in the audience was as well, so thank you, Darrin. And we now move on to our second musical interlude. I'd like to invite once again Maria Elena Farrugia and Fiorella Camilleri, who will now perform Cinema Paradiso and Nella Fantasia by Ennio Morricone. Thank you once again. Thank you once again to Maria Elena and Fiorella, who performed Cinema Paradiso and Nella Fantasia by Ennio Morricone. I would now like to invite Kevin Assa to speak about Darrin Zammit Lupi's achievements in the field of professional photography. Kevin, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, good evening, everybody. Tonight, as you know, we're here to celebrate someone whose work has not only documented history and inspired a lot of others, but has also touched hearts around the world, not only in Malta, but around the world. As you know, we are celebrating Darrin. For over 3 decades, Darrin's camera has taken him from Malta to war zones, disaster areas, and the open sea. He began in the early 90s, covering local stories, and before long, he was in Bosnia capturing the devastating human toll of war. Since then, he's worked with Reuters, the Times of Malta, Freelance, a lot of other top journalistic outlets. He tells the stories that matter most, from earthquakes and uprisings to the refugee crisis to the lives changed by migration and across the Mediterranean. One must not forget his valid activism through his camera, whenever he sincerely feels that the need arises, alas, even on our island. What makes his work so powerful is not just what he shows us, but how he shows it, with honesty, compassion, and deep respect for the people in front of his lens. His long-term project on migration, the ones everybody has already mentioned, Islanders, challenged stereotypes and gave dignity to people who are often ignored, in fact. Along the way, he's been recognized with major international awards. As said before by one of the other speakers, if we were to mention them all, it would take a lot of time. But his achievements are very wide. His images, just to mention, have appeared in Time, the New York Times, The Guardian, and countless other magazines and publications. His work is also held in permanent collections, ensuring these stories will endure for generations. Beyond journalism, he's also brought that same eye for truth and emotion into film sets and theaters. This is a recent work he's been doing as well. Capturing the soul of performance just as beautifully as the chaos of a rescue at sea. Not only are his photographs full of meaning and expression, but they are, most times, amazing artworks, with the ideal composition, lighting techniques, and impact. And that is not an easy thing to do, because the situations he's photographing usually are chaotic, dangerous, etc., etc. But Darrin can really capture the moment, and in a world bombarded by images, his photographs have the power of stopping us, not only to view, but to browse and reflect particularly. Darrin's photographs remind us of our shared humanity. They challenge us, they move us, and stay with us long after we've actually seen them. Darrin, it's an honor to recognize you tonight. This honor bestowed by the Malta Society of Arts is truly deserved, because Darrin, outwardly reserved and unassuming, is a towering figure in the world of photojournalism. Thank you.
Thank you there, Kevin. Thank you for that speech and for mentioning only a few of Darrin's achievements. And now we continue with the third and final musical interlude. Maria Elena and Fiorella will now perform Oblivion and Libertango by Astor Piazzolla. Let's give them a round of applause. Beautiful. Wow. Well done. Let's take a very well-deserved bow. Maria Elena Faruta on the piano and Fiorella Camilleri on the flute. Thank you. Very very beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. I think from the applause you could tell that that was very well received. Thank you. It is now my pleasure to invite Mr. Roderick Camilleri, Acting President of the Malta Society of Arts, to deliver his address. Roderick, in your hands.
Eccellenza, membri tal-Kumitat, mistednin distinti, ninsabu għal-moment partikolari ħafna, moment importanti mhux biss għal Darrin Zammit Lupi, imma wkoll għas-soċjetà u għal dawk kollha li jsegwu l-art u l-kultura fil-kuntest lokali. Illum qed nirrikonoxxu l-kontribut ta' Zammit Lupi fil-qasam tal-photojournalism. U għaldaqstant qed nagħtu dawl il dak ix-xogħol u l-impatt ta' dan l-individwu. Se naqleb ftit bl-Ingliż għal konvenjenza ta' dawk li m'għandhomx ix-xorti isegwu id-diskors qasajjar tiegħi bil-Malti. So, Your Excellency, committee members, distinguished guests, friends and colleagues, we are here for a very particular moment for this event of the Gold Medal. And it's good to say that the Gold Medal is not simply an award. It is a statement of values. It is a marker that recognizes continuity, discernment, and cultural contribution. This is why we are here. It has been here with us for the past decades, and it was established to commemorate the contribution of different individuals. It honored individuals whose substantial contribution and excellence have played a vital role in the advancement of cultural, economic, social, and artistic practice, presenting a living legacy. And it is within this context and framework that we are celebrating the work of Zammit Lupi. Zammit Lupi's work is distinguished not just for his technical ability, but also for his vision. He speaks to our identity. He discloses narratives which revolve around migration, displacement, strife, and thus it puts Malta and the Mediterranean at the center of global visual discourse, not as a margin or as margins, but as a site of profound contemporary relevance. The international and national recognition he has received attest to the impact of his work. Today, by awarding the gold medal to Zammit Lupi, the Society does more than honor an individual career. It affirms that artistic practice asserts ethics and vision. It is also a form of cultural service and reminds us that art is not a luxury. It is memory. It is witness. It is a social-political statement. It is a way of understanding who we are and the world we inhabit. In recognizing Darrin Zammit Lupi, we recognize an artist who has chosen to look carefully, to listen deeply, and to place humanity at the center of his work. Darrin, congratulations for this most deserved honor. Proset u kompli għanqalna bix-xogħlijiet tiegħek. Grazzi.
Thank you, Roderick. Thank you for those words. I would now like to invite Her Excellency the President of Malta, Ms. Miriam Spiteri de Bono, to join me here on stage because it is now the very well-awaited moment of presenting the certificate and gold medal to Darrin Zammit Lupi. Her Excellency, I would like to invite you here on stage, address us.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The reason we are all here tonight is the award of the Gold Medal of the Malta Society of Arts, the annual award celebrating excellence and lasting contribution to our cultural life. In awarding it today to Darrin Zammit Lupi, we recognize not only a distinguished career, but a practice grounded in responsibility, empathy, and also public service. For more than 3 decades, his work has shaped how many of us view the world and how we see ourselves in it, freezing moments of human experience, humankind's interaction with each other and with nature. Work which took him far beyond our shores into conflict zones and disaster areas, always seeped with a deep respect for human dignity. Whether working in the Mediterranean, the Balkans, Southeast Asia, or closer to home, his images observe, record, and ask us to look more carefully and above all to connect. Beginning his career in the early 1990s, Darrin moved quickly from local journalism into the wider world of international reporting. His early documentation of the war in Bosnia already revealed his skill, not only to tell the story of the crisis, but also to record resilience. This quality would continue to guide him throughout his long association with the Times of Malta, where for 2 decades he chronicled the political, social, and cultural life of our country, and through his work with Reuters, which brought his images to audiences across the globe. One of the most significant and sustained strengths of Darrin Zammit Lupi's career has been his long-term documentation of irregular migration that has already been mentioned by previous speakers. For over 25 years, he has been present where stories are often read as numbers or headlines. His practice took him aboard rescue vessels, in reception centers, and at moments of arrival, moments marked by exhaustion, by fear, and to a certain extent, relief. His photographs insist on the humanity of those he portrays. They do not offer easy answers. They demand attention and reflection. Darrin's contribution has been widely recognized. His many honors, both national and international, not only testify to professional excellence, but also to courage and integrity. Particularly moving is the recognition he receives for his deeply personal work documenting, permit me, his daughter's battle with illness, the Yanis Begraris International Photojournalism Award. From behind his lens, one can see and one can feel how his deep respect for human dignity is tangibly and deeply personal. Beyond journalism, his practice extends into film and theatre, where his still images preserve the intensity of performance and the atmosphere of storytelling. Whether on a film set or in a theatre, he brings the same quiet attentiveness and discipline to his craft. His photographs become part of our cultural memory, recording moments that would otherwise be lost. What unites all these strands is a clear guiding principle: to make images that matter, images that tell deeply moving stories, images that respect those they depict and challenge those who encounter them. The gold medal of the Malta Society of Arts recognizes not only his artistic skill, but also his contribution to the public good. Through his work, Darrin has expanded our understanding of photography as a civic act of responsibility, empathy, and public service. One that informs, remembers, and bears witness. The recognition bestowed upon him today acknowledges his mastery of his craft and skills, his empathy and compassion, his recordings of moments frozen in time of people's suffering. And these signal his contribution of enduring interests to humankind's collective memory. On behalf of the Republic of Malta, and in recognition of his emotional contribution to the arts and to journalism, Darrin, I congratulate you. It is very, very well deserved.
Gold medal. Eva. Darrin, please join us on stage. And we will start with the certificate first, and then we move on to the gold medal. Let's move to the center for the photographs. We start with the certificate first. Yes, we can open it. Let's open it. There it is. And now we move on to the gold medal. Her Excellency, please present the gold medal to our 2025 awardee, Darrin Zammit Lupi.
Wow, thank you so much. That wasn't part of the speech. So, Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, thank you. Before anything else, I want to say how deeply honoured I am to be standing here tonight. Many of you might not know this, but my late grandfather, the Judge Anthony Montanaro Gauci, was president of this society for many years, for over a decade, I believe. And he was a great believer in the value of this award. And he was someone who supported my artistic endeavours from a very young age, my young age, not his. And that's what makes this occasion especially meaningful. Awards like this are never really about one person. They're about a journey and the people who shape it. Let me start with one of those moments. When I was very young at school, in junior school at De La Salle College, I wasn't the most attentive of students, far from it. My school books, my exercise books, and occasionally, my desk, the whole desk, were filled with drawings. Those were my canvas. I would fill the school desks with drawings and doodles. And I do this during lessons instead of listening to the teacher. And one day I was caught, and the teacher sent me to the head of the junior school, and I'm telling you, I was terrified. But instead of punishing me, he did something extraordinary. He sent me to meet the senior school's art teacher, a man whose reputation was almost legendary. And in that moment, something shifted. What could have been a reprimand became encouragement. And that headmaster, Brother Edward, now 101 years old, he wanted very much to be here tonight. He couldn't be. But I want to acknowledge him because without that quiet act of belief, I genuinely don't know where I would be today. Had he acted differently, my love for the visual arts might easily have been extinguished back then. Who knows where I'd be now, yeah? And it taught me something early on, that curiosity isn't a flaw, and that creativity, when nurtured, can become a compass. And years later, that compass didn't point me where anyone expected. No. I didn't start off wanting to be a photographer. I wanted a military career, the British Army, of all things. I was young, idealistic, probably naive. I even enlisted before realizing it wasn't my path. So I came home, much to my parents' relief, no doubt, and returned to university, though I knew I was still searching for something else. Photography found me properly in the early 1990s, as has been said by others, just as Malta's media landscape was changing. And when I picked up a camera seriously, I knew exactly what I wanted. Not studio work, not comfort, but stories, real ones, news, people, consequence. And that instinct took me beyond Malta, to places like Albania and then war-torn Bosnia. And I imagine my parents' relief at my leaving the army quickly evaporated once again. And yet they supported me throughout. And that brings me to the work that has defined much of my life. For nearly 3 decades now, I've been documenting migration across the Mediterranean. Malta, by geography and history, sits at the fault line of one of the world's great humanitarian stories. And yet, too often, migration is reduced to numbers, headlines, politics. And what I've tried to do through projects like Islanders and through my work at sea is slow that story down, to show not crises, but people, not statistics, but faces, not fear, but moments of tenderness, dignity, and exhaustion. I've seen mothers calming children in the dark of a rescue deck. I've seen volunteers extend a hand without asking a name. I've seen what happens when borders collide with human need. And I've learned that photography at its best isn't about shock. It's about proximity. It's about asking the viewer to stay a little longer, long enough to feel something. And that comes with responsibility. There's always a risk in this kind of work, the risk of turning suffering into spectacle. Suffering can look beautiful. It's a very controversial thing. But I've come to believe that beauty, when handled honestly, can be a way in, not a distraction, but an invitation to care. If people don't look, they don't feel. And if they don't feel, nothing changes. And that's why I believe documentary work sits somewhere between journalism and art. It doesn't give answers, it asks better questions. It slows us down in a world that rushes past complexity. And that idea of bearing witness has guided me more than anything else. I've been incredibly fortunate in the people who've walked that path with me. Editors, mentors, colleagues, friends, far too many to name here tonight. But those of you who are here tonight and those who couldn't be know exactly who you are. From my earliest days at the Malta Independent, in Nazione, to Times of Malta, to Reuters, and to the NGOs, agencies and military units I've been privileged to work alongside, I owe you all more than I can properly express. I owe particular thanks to my parents, who supported choices that must have worried them deeply, and to my wife, Marisa, who has lived with the realities of this work with extraordinary patience and strength. Unfortunately, she's unable to be here tonight, as she's away on a trip that was organised and paid for long before we knew anything about this award. Almost there. There are also two people I want to mention who are no longer with us. One is my cousin, Daphne Caruana Galizia, who was also my first editor, and who taught me that journalism only matters if it is prepared to be uncomfortable. The other is my daughter, Bex, a budding artist in her own right. We marked 5 years since her passing not long ago, earlier this month. She was my fiercest supporter. Excuse me. I knew I'd struggle to get to this next part, but she was my fiercest supporter, my harshest critic, and my biggest believer. I know without question that she's somewhere here tonight, smiling, and telling me to keep going, which I'm failing miserably at. Excuse me, sorry. But that is what this award represents to me. Not a conclusion, not a full stop, but a reminder and a responsibility to keep looking, to keep questioning, and to keep telling stories that matter. Because as long as there are people who feel unseen, unheard, or forgotten, then our work isn't done. Thank you truly for this honour. It means more than I can say. Thank you.
Thank you. We have now come to the end of the ceremony, a celebration of Darrin and a celebration of excellence, dedication and artistic vision. On behalf of the Malta Society of Arts, I'd like to thank Her Excellency, the President of Malta, Darrin Zammit Lupi, Roderick Camilleri, Ariadne Massa, Kevin Assa, Marielena Farrugia, Fiorella Camilleri, and all of you for honouring us with your presence tonight. We'd also like to thank the sponsors for tonight's ceremony, HSBC Malta Foundation, Avantec, Emanuel Delicata Winemaker, and Times of Malta. Thank you for your contributions. After the national anthem, I'd like to invite Her Excellency, MSA's acting president, and the committee, as well as Prevarti and representatives of the HSBC Malta Foundation, to make their way just here to our chapel for the unveiling of Inglot's restored painting of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. Yes, we have two big events in one night tonight. We're making the most of the presence of Her Excellency as well. The rest of the audience kindly remain seated for now, just for a few more minutes, and after that we will go downstairs for some refreshments. For myself, Antonella Axis, I'd like to thank you. I wish you a good rest of the evening, so let's listen to the national anthem. We can stand up. Thank you.